Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dhammapariyesanā. Today is day 33. In today's discussion, we'll be discussing a very eye-opening topic. Just as we did yesterday, we've been talking how to manage, how to overcome stress with regard to students. Yesterday, with the student actually herself. And then today, we're going to be discussing about interpersonal relationships, particularly on conflicts. So I invited a guest for this interesting discussion. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our guest today, who is Patricia Kincaid, who is joining with us from Calgary, Canada. To paraphrase Patricia Kincaid has a Master's of Education in Cognitive Psychology and a Bachelor's of Education. I guess she earned all these degrees from Queen's University in Ontario, Canada. And she has been teaching primary, junior, ESL, special education kids for a long time. Over the last 22 years, she has worked with individuals with diverse intellectual, emotional, and cognitive abilities. As a mother, she has a keen interest in social justice issues and improving cross-cultural dialogue. Believing in universal responsibility towards each other, Patricia seeks to improve human relationships through effective communication skills, which is a part of our discussion today. For enjoyment, Patricia enjoys music, writing, and spending time in nature with her furry best friends. And I think you are a good fit to talk about this topic today, Patricia. How are you, Patricia, today?
I'm wonderful. And how are you?
I'm good too. How is the weather in Calgary today?
It's actually quite warm and beautiful. We have a Chinook in, so it feels like spring and everything's melting.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Patricia, let me start this way. Interpersonal relationships. We know this is a big topic, and there are a lot of interpersonal relationships that we can see, especially when it comes to normal life. We know there are marital and friendship and workplace kind of interpersonal relationships. It is always not a possibility for all these individuals to have a very comfortable, pleasant relationships with each other, because when they express their dissent over different things, and that's the place where they get into arguments and displeasure and all that. So we're going to be talking interpersonal relationships with a focus on conflicts in common. We are not trying to nail down to this group and that group. So we can pretty much discuss and give a kind of a generic idea towards those who are struggling with conflict, especially when it comes to interpersonal relationships. So my first question to you, Patricia, is that could you, define a little bit about what these interpersonal relationships are when it comes to conflict?
Sure. Thank you for asking that question. Really, anytime we find ourselves in communication with another person or any sort of relationship, whether that be work, family, or even buying something from a store, we are engaging in communication and also a relationship. And in any of those situations, I'm sure we've all had experiences where we felt misunderstood, or we were misunderstood, or we misunderstood someone else. And then that can lead to communication problems, up to including arguments. Situations.
Mm-hmm. So, when it comes to personal life, let's talk about relationships when it comes to parents and children.
Yes.
In the first place, and you are a mother.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
So how do you view this, parental relationship with kids or children? How do you think this is kind of a good way to keep this relationship going?
Yes.
And what are the things that you see in particular in that kind of a relationship? And what could be the what could be the common issues that could, be seen when it comes to parental relationship with kids?
So I'm speaking, of course, from being a mother of 2 children, both of whom have grown now, but our relationship continues to develop, and also having worked with children throughout my life. The number one thing that causes conflict in either of those relationships is judgment. And that's judging whether or not we are conscious of doing it or not. If we begin from a place of just observing without judgment, so just describing what we see and hear, then we remove that judgment away from the behavior. And then that gives us a chance to really look at the behavior to see how the behavior speaks. So all behavior speaks. So we may have a child who's acting out, swearing, skipping school, whatever it is. But if we approach that with judgment, then we're labeling the behavior and the child as being bad. And of course, if we feel that we're being judged, we're going to stop the dialogue instead of embracing that chance to express and to explain. So partly, we also need to not just judge the behavior, not judge the behavior, but also to help give safe space for children to express themselves differently.
Don't you think that children are always learning? So, I mean, if you take a topic out from this, particular big discussion, social learning theory, like children, they witness what's going on, inside the home. So they kind of like learn how the parents respond each other. So what if there is a kind of a dysfunctional conflict management at home? So they might be oversensitive or undersensitive to anger and all those responses. So what is the importance of having a household where parents are better responding each other, better doing such things, so that children are not affected for their future upcoming lives?
That's a very good question. And I wanted to say in the very beginning, I have not been a perfect parent. My children have not always seen effective communication, nor have they always seen me being regulated. So it's important that as adults, we understand when we've made a mistake and we can apologize, try again, and learn to model those skills. I find that a lot of us who have grown maybe haven't been taught these same skills we're trying to teach our children. That's okay. It's okay as long as we are trying to do better, like we're always trying to learn. So for children who are seeing a lot of conflict in the home, of course they might mirror that. But there's also opportunities for that child in other engagement opportunities. So if you're an adult who works with children in, let's say, Scouts, Girl Guides, 4-H, whatever it is, you have the opportunity to step up and step in and model those skills that maybe the children at home aren't having. So this goes back into what you asked me previously about children and behavior and things like that. If you're an adult who's working with children who are exhibiting these behaviors, then that's speaking that they need to have that social learning opportunity to gain those skills.
Patricia, would you mind just turning to the side, because you are not in the perfect camera?
Hold on, I'll go like this. Yeah. Great. Okay,
yeah, much better.
About that. Sorry.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about causes of why conflict arises when it comes to interpersonal relationships. So, I always see these as very common reasons, to many. One of the reasons that I see is content. So the content of the event or situation, it can raise, emotionality when it comes to critical, accusatory or sarcastic kind of, emotional responses that are in the contents of the particular event. So, they can precipitate anger, right? So one of the things that I can see in many conflicts is the content, what is inside the particular response and regarding event. And also, I understand the tone, because when you look at the people who are into trouble, who are in conflict, they have a very, negative tone. It's not a quiet, measured tone. It's not calm. So the other people also get into the problem, right?
Yes.
So it's basically about how one speaks and how one raises the voice in terms of the different events. So it's of course, if someone can maintain a quiet, measured tone, they can lower at least the level of what do you call the tone and the conflict, and also the whole response, the whole behavior. Now, for example, I would say, sometimes when something is going to happen, if the other party can feel it, at least start in an apologetic tone, to over the situation, to de-escalate. But some are not trying to de-escalate. They just let it go the way, because they always want to defend. I'm right. I'm correct. You are wrong.
Yes.
You did the wrong thing, and I'm okay. You are the one who is making up. So, like, even if I look at these three main causes, so the content of the particular event that caused the conflict, and the kind of a tone of the speech or the talking, at the same time, the whole behavior of the person who is making this up. So I think there are many more other causes why there are conflicts, and behind the conflict there are many reasons. So how do you understand the causes of conflicts in general? I mean, it could be romantic relationships, it could be parental relationships, it could be workplace. Regardless of the place, people, kind of the relationship, but there are similar causes. So how do you recognize these causes? Are there any different other reasons? Please share with us some of.
So what I have found when I'm interacting with people that are getting escalated, it could be because they're bringing in things from their past. Maybe that's how they've learned to communicate. Also, too, they could be reading our body language wrong, our own tone of voice. The thing is it almost doesn't matter what the content is. If someone is in a conflict with you, it makes you feel uncomfortable, and chances are you want to de-escalate that. So again, a lot of times people escalate because they aren't feeling validated. They're not feeling heard. So sometimes if they feel you're not listening to me or you're not agreeing with me, they're bringing in that baggage from the past, and we're stuck here in the present with them. So when someone does that, it's really important, again, to not judge them, whether or not we agree with their position or not, and try to validate them in some way. For example, you could say, I can tell that's really important to you because of the way you're talking about it. You're very passionate. But right now, I don't know enough about that subject to engage in this conversation. Or you could even say, the tone of voice you're having with me right now and the volume is actually triggering for me. And I'm feeling really uncomfortable. Is there a way that we can talk about this so that we're not uncomfortable? I myself am challenged in this area over social justice issues. So social justice issues tend to start me off here, where someone else may be down here. So I have to remember when I'm talking about them to bring it down a little bit and to engage my listener without being escalating sometimes. So,
is there a way people don't need to think about validations? Because we even we think that we should be validated from the people that we really want to be with, but sometimes it doesn't happen. Do you also think that validations are good, but we should not expect validations all the time? So how is that a healthy way of looking at validations?
I'll be honest with you, I do struggle a lot with this one. I do. I wasn't validated a lot for a lot of things I felt strongly about throughout my life. So it is a skill that is challenging for me, but it is so important. And I see it a lot with children. So I'll go back to that because I work a lot with children. And we've all seen a child having a meltdown or a temper tantrum, expressing themselves through lots of emotion. And we may not agree with it. It may make us uncomfortable, but we still validate that child. Like we can say, wow, it looks like you're really tired, or that was really hard for you. What ends up happening is that child learns to identify emotions, they learn how to cope, but they also learn how to validate themselves. So when you ask if it's a useful skill, yes, it is. It's important for us to be able to validate how we feel, because then we aren't as escalated. Sometimes we can understand ourselves better and we're kinder. Validation lets us be kinder to each other. Oh, I'm sorry. I can't hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, like, should people, I mean, common, be that, in school, anywhere else, should they be validated for something that they are not really deserved?
That's a good question.
How should we do that? Because we know everyone likes to get validated. I mean, just to get the things okay, or just to keep the situation comfortable, if we think that we're going to validate people, but how does that go actually?
So to take a step back, when we're having a conversation and if it's escalating, we have different goals in it. So it could be your goal is to keep your pride or your self-worth. Your goal could be about the content or the subject, or your goal could be about maintaining that relationship. So depending on what your goal is in the conversation, it will change how you interact. So with validation is a really good way to create a safe space and to de-escalate. The challenge with validation is to be authentic. So not to just kind of say anything that you don't mean, because that could actually escalate things. But it is important because it's part of active listening, right? So then we know the other person's actually hearing us. They're listening to our words. And that is the tricky part. And it takes a lot of practice. And I'm still practicing. I'm no expert at it. But it has helped a lot with my relationships. And it's helped a lot de-escalate conflict with my own teenagers when I can at least validate where they're coming from.
Well, I mean, that's a very healthy habit. Let's talk a little bit about healthy, quiet tone, during conversations. A lot of people, they don't feel that they need to. They don't want to cool down. They kind of like, throw at other person, like, I don't want to be cool. I really want to, raise my voice, and then of course I feel like I'm happy. I'm validated. When there are disturbing things happen, if the party who's supposed to be victimized, if they raise their voice, they don't feel comfortable. So what is the importance of having a quiet, measured tone during difficult conversations?
The importance is, like you described, it sets the feeling of the relationship. It sets the feeling of the conversation. I just want to clarify, though, that if ever you're in danger or someone is harming you in any way, you don't have to validate them. You don't have to maintain a certain presence. You have to be safe. And that's a boundary. So even though someone may start throwing things and they may think at that moment, it's okay, it's not okay. The times to have those kind of conversations, if it's like a child or sometimes even an adult, is after when they've calmed down. You can talk about it. You can say, I ended the conversation because I felt unsafe. It's okay to get angry. Angry is a normal human emotion, but it is not okay to hurt people or to hurt things. That's not okay. When someone is escalating with you, it's like you said, it's really important to have a firm tone and also your body language. And that's a boundary. And it's okay to have those boundaries. And that's also about validating what you need. So in a conversation, for example, with myself, it's triggering if someone yells and raises their voice at me. So I always check before I make the judgment. I check the facts and I say, okay, it sounds like you're raising your voice to me and I don't like the tone. Do you mean to have that tone with me, or are you just upset and you need to let off steam? And coming from that place, sometimes if people get that check of what they sound and look like, they can actually stop. And also too, if we remain regulated and use that calm tone of voice and have that firm boundary, we are modeling that for them. That this is how you can look and sound when you're upset without raising your voice and throwing things.
Patricia, can you delineate about some of the cooperative approaches at difficult conversations? Like, what could, we're going to be talking at the end of this discussion about what can we do to, overcome conflicts,
yes.
When it comes to interpersonal relationships. But, the whole behavior matters. This is one of the biggest reasons of why people are into conflict. So what are the things like wrong, I would say, non-cooperative approaches people take during a difficult a conversation or a encounter. Have you ever found out what do like? I know raising the voice is some of the main things, and as you said, the body language. What are the other things that people do to what do you call irritate other person so that this is escalating without boundaries?
So if someone else is escalating, sometimes they'll talk faster, they will talk louder, they will start to bring in things that have nothing to do with the topic or the conversation. When you hear things like that, it's important to realize that the person's already using an older part of their brain. It's like reptilian brain, where they're no longer logically thinking. So sometimes when we say, oh, just stop and think about what you're saying, they can't at that point. And at any of those points that you feel uncomfortable, it is okay to stop the conversation and remove yourself from it. And tell them, when I hear you using appropriate tone, appropriate language, or when you're ready to talk to me about this, when you feel calmer, I'm ready to talk to you. But you do not have to engage with someone if they're making you feel uncomfortable. It's okay, right? Like, again, it's about practicing kindness and being kind to yourself. So know your own limit, know your own boundary, and you can sense that, you can feel it.
Great. Let me say a couple of the negative outcomes of being into conflict. So one of the things that I see is emotional responses: depression, anger, anxiety, less satisfaction with the relationship, emotional and physical withdrawal, psychological responses such as increased stress, harmful physical behavior such as violence, and so on and so forth. If we really follow a good way to overcome conflicts, then we will definitely be experiencing positive outcomes. I mean, we will be talking what we could do after this. Among the positive outcomes, we could see reduce anxiety, increase closeness with each other. I mean, at the end, if we could really overcome, then we will be more intimate with the people that we really know, want to be in a better way, not letting the disagreement become more intense, understanding each party's opinion by having meaningful and open discussion within the family, demonstrating positive conflict resolution as an example to the children. Now, let me ask you about disagreements. Like I think we all do not agree at all times for different reasons. We may agree on many things. I mean, like friends, but I mean, when it comes to parents and children, partners, workplace people, there could be a disagreement. So the problem is a lot of people don't think that they can be differently good. They can be differently right. They always think they're right and other person should accept what I believe.
No.
So why is this problem, expanding within people? Why people don't think that just because someone believes this, even though I'm having a different opinion, if you really look at the sort of like a format of the same thing, but it could be the same, but you look at that thing differently. So when we talk about disagreements, could we find out a healthy approach to see disagreement and not to get into trouble?
Yes, and there's so many memories came back in my head as you were talking, again, as I've learned from experience and I continue to learn. I think some of it comes from an intolerance to distress or an intolerance to difference. So sometimes that comes from we think from a need to try and keep people safe, or from a need to try and do the right thing. And again, that comes with judgment, because now I'm judging what that person's thinking. I'm judging them as a person. The truth is we have no idea what someone else is thinking. We can only observe their actions. So even as a parent, I had to get really good with the skill quickly. And I found sometimes a lot of our disagreements, these differences, were because I was coming from a place where I really wanted to love and protect my children, but that was hindering their growth. So sometimes I had to take a step back. I created a safe space where we could have this kind of dialogue. And I learned that some of the stuff I was doing was actually not in the best interest of my kids, that they needed to experience these things to grow. And then when you look at the larger society, it's kind of the same thing. Like, why do you and I have to have agreement on everything? Why can't I just respect that you have a difference? And when I feel that I'm not being respected, a lot of times I find people are judging me. So again, it comes from that judgment, where it's okay if someone has a completely different political viewpoint or a different stance in social justice. I have to respect where they're at and not judge them as a person, which is really difficult, especially when they have very vast differences. But the conflict comes when we want someone to agree with us, when we want to change their opinion. And to be honest, none of our opinions have ever changed because someone argued with us. They usually change through intellectual discussion, through a safe place to talk about things, and through relationship. And that's why when we're doing this work, which it is work, we need to really build that relationship. So if you have a closer relationship with someone, or a better ability to communicate with some people than others, then you're more likely to have growth and change within that, instead of arguing with them, which is where a lot of things go. And that's usually when I stop the discussion, is because I don't want to argue with people.
Yeah, great. So let's move on to the last part of this discussion. It's about how to overcome conflicts, in interpersonal relationships. Like, I see two main pillars when it comes to, steps that people could follow. One is the communicative skills, while the other is conflict resolution methods.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Patricia, you brought up active listening. So this active listening is a big part of our life, supposed to be, but we normally we prefer to talk a lot rather than we don't want to listen to other people because we think that we are right, we are correct, right?
Or
so
we're searching for that validation. We're searching to be heard.
Validation,
right?
Yeah, right. So the thing is that, but people also think that if we let other people talk longer, they feel like it can sort of like harm one's ego and this validation thing. But you said when it comes to our intimate, personal kind of relationships, we might not be the person who we present outside the house, right?
Yes.
Because that's our comfort zone. So if we take a look at this communicative skills, like not even active listening, but also things like apologizing, taking time to respond rather than letting you to react right away. There are many other things we can talk about when it comes to communicative skills. And when we talk about this conflict resolution method, there are a lot of things like open-mindedness,
mindfulness.
Yeah, we're going to talk.
Yes.
That. Yeah. And open-mindedness, not being into close-mindedness, cooperative skills. Sometimes people don't know when to face this particular response, this particular encounter. So and mindfulness, that you are trying to be mindful during the situation, because we never know what time these people getting mad and going to yell, scream. So could you delineate about these two pillars of conflict resolution, or I would say how to overcome conflicts when it comes to interpersonal relationships? So communicative skills and different other techniques you figure out by conflict resolution methods.
That's a really good question. It's a good way to kind of pull it apart, because we may be strong in some areas. Actually, we tend to be stronger in some areas because we use those skills more than others. And it's almost difficult to see where one ends and one begins. So, because how we interact is a form of communication, our body language. Like when you're talking about how we appear differently at home versus public, right? That goes to the masks, the different masks we wear. And they're functional, and they're meant to do so for a reason. Some of the things that we can do to kind of de-escalate conflict within ourselves is not engage in it. Don't take it personally. The other thing is recognize when you're becoming dysregulated. So recognize when your stress level is starting to go too high, where you're beginning to take what they're saying personally. in order to do that, you have to learn how to almost calm yourself down. And again, we practice that when we're not upset. So for example, if someone's talking to me about social justice issues and I'm getting really upset because I think that they're just not thinking about the greater good of everyone, I actually have to disengage and realize this isn't an attack on me personally, or even if it is an attack on me personally, nothing's going to be gained from this. So sometimes I have to go for a walk, I have to meditate, I got to take myself out of it. Again, at no time do you have to engage with someone who's being abusive or who violates your basic principles. So that's why it's kind of hard for me to pull them apart, because I've learned so hard to incorporate them into one and the same. And I think it's because it speaks to behavior, right? Like, how do we manage our own behavior so we don't escalate something? Like you mentioned, active listening, but there's also a point where you don't have to listen anymore. Like if someone's ranting and raving and they're being rude to you, or they've crossed that personal boundary, then you have to know in yourself that you're okay with leaving that conversation, that you're okay with maybe that relationship taking a hit because your value is more important. So those are some of the things that I think about. I'm not really sure if that answered your question, but I'm still thinking on your question. It was a good thought-provoking question.
No, I was asking you about, other conflict resolution methods, like when it comes to, you said that we all have boundaries, and if we know that we are not able to face this person with our, abilities, we may have to walk away. Maybe if person is getting violent, we are not supposed to, be with that person. So we need to seek out professional help, professional support or whatever.
Thank you. And very important. And that actually goes to what forgot to mention, that it's okay to practice these skills with other people. So if you yourself have a hard time setting boundaries, practice with a friend what that sounds like and what that looks like. Also to learn your own triggers, which I know I mentioned before, but that's almost not a communication thing. That's just your own method. So for example, if you know right now that shopping at the mall is going to trigger you, and then if you're the last person in line and the girl is rude to you at the checkout, those are all triggers, and they're all things that you can step back from before you have a conflict. So controlling your sensory environment, which I forgot to mention, is really important. So do what calms you. For some people, that's taking a cold drink. So sometimes you see people in the mall with a cold drink. That's a great way to regulate yourself. Because if you're already sensory overwhelmed from sound or through sight, then you're going to have a less tolerance for distress, and you're going to have less ability to de-escalate yourself. So that's really important, to stay regulated. That's not a communication skill, but that's a skill to have for sure.
Can the meditation be an antidote to many conflicts? If so, what are the kind of meditations you practice in your life? Is it taking deep breaths, or how do you prepare yourself, and what time if you do that? Maybe you can recommend people who watch this. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about a meditation that could help understand violent situations, conflicts, and what could meditation help to ameliorate, help out with conflicts,
Yes. That's a wonderful question, and thank you for asking it. So when I was first learning these different communication skills, which I have been taught them, I continue to go to learn more. My teacher actually started with mindfulness practice. And all of us in the room were quite confused. Why would we start there when we're having conflicts at home or conflicts with our children or at work? It seems almost like a silly place to start until you start to practice it. So we began with just very simple observational mindfulness practice. So describe the carpet or describe the plant. And then we worked to more mindfulness breath awareness. So feel the breath go into your body. Where do you feel it? There's lots of things on YouTube for that kind of mindfulness as well. And then over the course of many months, we developed more of a mindfulness practice to actually, when we start to feel escalated or upset, it'd be like, okay, let's be mindful of that and sit in the emotion. When you practice sitting in difficult emotions, it makes you able to tolerate them better when you're out in the world doing it. So it's almost like exercise for your brain. When we are mindful, we are more regulated, we are more balanced, and we begin to see things from a different perspective, neither right nor wrong, just a perspective, because we can observe it. It's also a wonderful skill to have. So when you are, let's say, you've just had an argument with someone and now you have to go to work, you can take a few minutes, practice that breath awareness, and get your heart rate down. It's very hard to be upset with people when your heart rate is low and your breathing is calm. It puts you in control of your body through disciplining your mind. And it's wonderful. There's then from there we went to guided meditations, and there's wonderful guided meditations on YouTube. So the idea is that none of us are masters in meditation, of course. Oftentimes when you're doing it, you think I'm doing it wrong, and start off small. Start with 20 seconds and work your way up.
And meditation is a continuing journey. It's not a standalone, one day practice, and we all need to keep that continuing.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that, because I know when I was first practicing, I looked at my teacher who has been practicing for over 40 years. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's an expert. And she's like, no, I'm still a student. And there are some days where I meditate 3 or 4 times a day to get through that day. But it's something I do every day regardless, because it helps with my anxiety. And I wasn't sure why it helped with my anxiety, but it helps lower that breath. It helps lower the heart rate. And it helps put you into your body in a safe, calm way. Not everyone has experience being in the body in a safe way. And sometimes those of us who experience that are higher stressed. And so it brings us down, so then we don't get as upset about things, and then you don't get into as many arguments.
Before I come to the conclusion, let me ask you a question, which could be a little personal to you, because you are a school teacher in Calgary now. So what is the single biggest conflict that you have observed in your teaching with students?
Between themselves or just in general? I think I honestly think children right now, they're not being valued for children, and they're being pushed to accomplish more and more instead of just seeing them as worthy individuals. There's a lot of time spent justifying what people are doing with their kids. Well, I took them to hockey, I took them to dance so they can do this, and then I'm taking them to gymnastics, and I planned a play session. Instead of just letting the children have autonomy over themselves in an age-appropriate way so that the children learn these skills. If we're always making the decisions for them, they're never going to have practice in doing this. It's almost like we're getting afraid to let them experience discomfort. And we know that we can grow from discomfort in a safe way, as long as it's safe and age appropriate.
That's a good way of looking at, what you've been doing. Now, folks, today we've been talking about interpersonal relationships with a focus on conflicts. And joining with me was today Patricia Kincaid, who's a school teacher in Calgary area in Canada. And we've been talking about what is an interpersonal relationship, and then what are the possible causes behind conflicts when it comes to interpersonal relationships. And we also talked about what are the positive and negative outcomes of conflicts, as well as when someone is into conflict resolution methods. And we also talked about how to overcome conflicts with a focus on different other interpersonal relationship groups. So I think this will help many who could understand different ways to put into their practice, put in their life. So thank you, Patricia.
Thank you
for accepting the invitation and joining with us. Thank you, Dhamma folks. Today we're going to be winding up this with the point, and stay tuned with another episode shortly. Thank you. Have a good day. Have a good night. Take care.
Thank you.